Good morning, everyone. We want to talk about segmentation because we believe it is time to rethink, to kind of relook at segmentation, knowing that there are new tools available. And there's a reason why we do so. It's not only because there's AI, there's more to it. When you look at it in segmentation, the traditional market segmentation that we've always been working alongside with, which was great help always, has done a great job for us. Gave us a really good understanding about the audiences and really broke it down for us in terms of have a good depth and understanding of what are the people that actually come in and buy our products and brands. However, we've seen also in our digital world today that these traditional segmentations have not been as effective being utilized when it comes to a digital environment to really make it more active and actionable to help us to find customers out there. So there's a big minus over there. And then on the other side, of course, AI and in particular machine learning has been used quite extensively for even microsegmentation when it comes to the digital world, and is doing a great job there to really understand behaviors, online and digital behaviors on that. However, even on that side, we can see there's clearly a lack of depth, understanding who's actually coming to my website, what kind of people, and why are they actually coming to my website. So that's something that's really missing on the AI and machine learning front. And also, it's based on previous behaviors, so it will always lack the imagination of what could be done to actually change behavior, because data can only learn from behaviors that are already there. So there are clearly negative points for each one of those approaches. So what we kind of thought through is like, we need to combine those two to have a more actionable tool to really drive the business more effectively. Because at the end, what we really want to know is, in particular, and I think that's the most important part, who are the people that actually buy our products and our brands? I mean, not only the social demographics, but also what are data points that help me to identify if somebody comes to my site or somebody somewhere else, how can I identify that this person is someone who might be interested in my product at that point in time? So the who is really, really important, and that's one thing we want to deliver on this. Second one is, what? What is the person looking for? What are the crucial features that are building value in people's head? What are the promotions, the discounts that really actually close the deal? So that's the other part that's really critical when it comes to segmentation, to figure out who wants what. And then next, when? When are these people ready to buy? When are these people really considering to actually move forward and go down in the funnel? So the when is critical. And lastly, why? Why are people actually buying? Why are they coming and buying my product over the competitor's product? What's the critical thing here? We need to understand that. So we set out to kind of develop this segmentation approach to answer those critical questions all along for us in our approach. Now, the interesting thing is, I think most of the data that you need to be able to run a sophisticated segmentation on that premise is data that you own. So it's your first-party data, whether it's your customer data, whether it's your campaign data, whether it's even like second-party data that you can get your hands on from your distributor. So there's lots of data out there, and I buy your point again from this morning, not all the data is gold, but we need to start collecting that data and manage that data so we have it, because then we can really form the who, the what, the when, and the why. So the only issue is you need to kind of structure that data. So what we're kind of claiming here and what we're doing and what we're going to showcase today is, on the one hand side, there is a data science frame that anyone can use when it comes to machine learning, when it comes to AI, more machine learning actually, when you can activate deep insights through like predictive and causal machine learning to really understand cause and effect, which is critical. So applying that framework will help a lot to answer those who, what, when, and why kind of questions. Secondly, what's critical is the why. So the social science part of it, whereas the psychology, whereas really what motivates people to buy your product and your brand, what really drives them to come to you and not to your competitor, what drives them in general in the category as well. So here we need to understand human needs, and we're applying behavioral psychology as well as mathematical psychology that really helps us to understand what builds value in people's mind. Why do I pay extra for this product or for this brand over this? So that's the other framework. So if we apply those two frameworks over this vast majority of data that we have, then we can answer those who, what, when, and why kind of questions, and that gives us the perfect segmentation. So we came up with this process. We have applied it quite a bit in a way of how can we apply that segmentation to make it an actionable and meaningful outcome in terms of really driving conversions and driving kind of customers to your place. First of all is the who, as I mentioned, which is probably the most critical one to really understand who is buying and who is willing to buy. So here is just an example from the travel industry. Let's say there's Alice as kind of being representative of that. She's the kind of key decision maker of a family of 4, and she's looking for a vacation. So if we know people like this are looking for a vacation right now, we know who we deal with, and we need to have more data points to identify this Alice person out there in the digital world. So that's the who, where we kind of apply the machine learning, and we call it PPM, is a purchase propensity modeling, where you can model out of what are the critical data points for me to identify an Alice that's actually out looking for that travel. Second is the what. So what is it that really kind of helps me to close the deal? Whether it's a particular feature, whether it's a particular promotion or a discount, what are the things that I need to kind of throw in so that an Alice would be interested to really book at that point in time? Again, this is uplift modeling as one example from the machine learning kind of set of tools that are out there and available. Then thirdly, we talked about the when. What is the right time? When do I have to talk to the person? When is the person actually ready to buy or to consider buying? So this is the other one where Alice, of course, if we know she would be ready within the next 2 weeks, it's the perfect time to talk to Alice, obviously. Thirdly, we then apply the psychology. It's like, okay, if Alice is in the market and this is what she's going after and this is what she's interested in, what really motivates her? What is really kind of triggering her need to go on a vacation? Here's just, again, as an example from a travel client. Alice, let's say, is a bonder as a psychological segment and only goes on vacation to be together with others. So it's all about the others. What can we throw in? And that kind of will be reflected in the promotions, will be reflected in the messages to really trigger Alice to book at your hotel or your resort. And then lastly, to make it more effective, and of course that's probably something that's more for a very sophisticated, very digitally driven client, a Gen AI tool cannot be missed in our set as well, where we can go in and having all these different elements, we have all the PPM modeling done and we have the psychology. We can feed the Gen AI model. It generates the message, it pushes it out, it tracks how successful it is, and it helps optimizing those messages to come to those segments over and over again. So you become better and better at it. So this is kind of the process that we want to go through with the segmentation that we feel like a client should have these days to really go out there and be most effective in their marketing endeavors, basically. Okay, let's look into each one of those steps. So the who, as I mentioned earlier, is the one that I'm personally most passionate about, because if you know who's your customer, then you have the best chances to actually kind of do something about it. So when it comes to the who, one tool that we're using, as I mentioned, is the propensity modeling, where you can go in and you can go either, and there's different audience, of course, you can go into your customer base and you work with your customer base data, or you can go in other ways, and I can show you in a minute what that would mean. The easiest, of course, you go into your customer base, you apply the propensity modeling, and then that will help you to figure out what are the propensity drivers. What are the digital points that I can recognize that this person is ready to buy? So even if that person comes on my website, I figure out, okay, this person is interested in X. So this is helping us to kind of figure out those kind of propensity drivers. So we are using here an example from the financial sector. We have to kind of mix and match because otherwise clients wouldn't be happy to show too much of that. So that was for a financial client. And then you go to the user attributes, you go through user behaviors, but you also go through external signals. So for this one, it was about gold. How do we identify people that are ready to buy gold? So then you go through the customer data and you understand all the features and all the kind of PPM drivers of that specific customer in terms of age, so demographics, behavior, how many accounts they have and all that. But you also want to look at how is the gold price going up and down, because that will also drive whether people are ready to buy or not. So you can take those external signals, and that all together helps you to really get a good picture of if someone is out there in the market to actually buy. In this case, it was gold. And then obviously, once you have all these elements, you can go into your CRM base first. That's always the easiest. And you can approach all the people that have very high likelihood on the propensity of buying and approach them with that gold product and be very effective in terms of selling it, in terms of upselling or cross-selling or just repeat selling. So that's always the easiest one, because if you have a good database of your customers, you can identify who's ready to buy quite specifically and also quite clear in terms of what kind of product and brand they're after. So that's kind of an example when it's only on the data front. Eddie, so
well, I'll also add that, I mean, going to the kind of earlier point that, you know, you can work from your first party data. I mean, a lot of this data you really do have, right? I think we have a lot of clients who assume like, well, we're not at a stage where, you know, we're going to be able to make use of, you know, all of this machine learning and so on because we don't think we have enough data. But actually, I mean, if you think about, most of your companies all have enough transactional data to be able to build models like this about customer behavior. You have all the campaign interaction data, or at least you should if you can, you know, talk to your agency potentially and retrieve that, right? So you have a lot of this data, and you can also bring in, like Laurenz pointed out, all of these external signals. I mean, also there's public data depending on the market you're in, like Australia, Singapore, you have great public data from the government, census data, so on, that gives you at a high level segmentation demographics. And you can combine all of these signals together and to be quite effective.
That's a good bridge, because because many clients feel, oh, I don't have enough data, I'm more an offline kind of client. But even in the offline world, it works really well, and I'll show you one example. So again, trying to figure out who are the people that would potentially buy. So we worked for a beverage company, alcoholic kind of beverage company, and it was all about Australia, and they wanted to figure out from our modeling, saying, okay, can you help me to pinpoint me to the best postal code in Australia where I have the biggest chance to increase my revenue with the smallest amount of money, of course. So there was no CRM database. It was completely offline. It was only figuring out, okay, where shall we go with this? So the data we could play with is, we had the sales and event data that they had previously run in Australia. So we could understand how much they spent on an event, where, and how much the sales increased within the postal code and around the postal code. So we had that historical data for 2 years, I believe. We had the Australian census data, which is massive. So it's really, really beautiful. You get a lot of understanding in terms of who lives in what kind of postal code, how they commute, all sorts of really beautiful kind of data points that you can actually use very effectively. So we had that, and I think we had like 3,300 postal codes, 62 tables with 17,000 field data points. So there's a lot of really good data actually. And thirdly, we used also the brand tracking data from that particular brand to figure out what is cause and effect, how does the event drive up the brand, how does the brand actually affect the sales, and so forth. So these were the three elements, completely offline, basically, that we used. And then we built a complete platform for that to really go in, and that the client was able to kind of say, okay, I want to run an event, let's say next month. I want to be in Queensland, for example. What's the best postal code though? So they could use that kind of interface that we created for them, say, okay, if you want to go into Queensland, where is like the biggest chance for me for that brand to increase my sales by how much? So here's just one example. So for that specific brand, we estimated then the total growth on top of the natural year-on-year growth. How much would that be in sales per postal code surrounding the event? So when you see that here, so that the event would be in the dark green, and then the lighter green are the surrounding ones within a radius, I think, of 10K. Yeah. And then we were able to estimate how much more revenue they would generate if they invested in that place. Right? So even to an extent where, does it make... Here, where you could kind of figure out how the curve would actually expand, not only in terms of how much in the height, but also how much in terms of length. And just by using, I think we started with 12 months data, or 6 months even or something, right?
You started with 12 months for a whole season.
Yeah. And then we built the accuracy of that model from 70% up to 80%. And if you kind of continue doing so, you get to an easy, like a 90% accuracy to figure out what the return will be on your investment in a complete offline environment, which to me is quite staggering. So I like what we do. Sorry, I'm not sell too much, right? Anyway, so this is just an example to understand who's buying. You can do this even in an offline environment, not only in an online environment. Anything I missed here?
I think
That's
good.
pretty much it. Okay. Okay, so that was the who for the segmentation and how we applied. Now let's look into the what. So what's the most impactful treatment? So I would expand on the what, not only the promotions and discounts, but maybe even, what are the features that are kind of critical. But here is an example that's very much driven by promotion. So it was a business-to-business client, or maybe I'll leave that to you to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, this was a very large FMCG client that was doing B2B sales, right? So it's their goods via their distributor to the various retailers. And I think for the issue here was quarterly, sometimes even less, management will change the sort of KPIs, one quarter, 1 month, it's, order frequency or basket size, and then it becomes, what's the actual customer lifetime value or something like that, or what's our campaign response, so on. So we needed to have a way that we could kind of tune the model to say, okay, for the given target that you're after, this is the kind of promotion that's going to yield the kind of activity you want. I mean, if you're trying to, increase the number of orders you're getting per month versus the absolute, revenue that you're trying to achieve, depending on your goals, you need to be able to target your promotions accordingly. And you can do that with, in this case, we had, I think, also about 2 years worth of data of distributor to retailer data. And so we could basically model what kind of promotions that they've run historically, had which kind of effect with which kind of retailer in what region. So this was a countrywide project that we did. And so I think the interesting thing here is, using even not that many signals from the sales distributor data they had, you're able to actually create a pretty sophisticated model for what is the right promotion to offer at the right time. Yeah, and this was something we rolled out in, I think, start to finish, 1 month. So 4 weeks start to finish before they actually did an execution. And we had, almost 25% revenue gain compared to their old solution in the very next campaign execution month. So, I mean, I think we were pretty happy with this, and we were pretty happy with the fact that it was adaptive, right? So then when management changed the KPI and said, okay, it's basket size, that's the most important thing, we could again roll out promotions that were tuned to individual retailers to yield the desired effect.
Okay, so that would kind of bring together the what in terms of what is the really kind of critical promotion that I should be pushing to my group of customers in that segment. Now moving on to the next one, which is the when. And of course, it's again very based on machine learning, where when you have a good kind of customer base, you can be very specific in terms of within the period of the next 2 weeks, right? We can who are the ones that have the highest propensity to buy, basically. And for me, because when you look at this, looks a little strange maybe, but at the end of the day, all it does is, let's say you had 6 months of data, you take 4 months and build the model, and then let the model predict who's going to buy in the next 2 weeks within the 5th month. And the model doesn't know the 5th month, but we do, and you can check the accuracy of the model. Then you see that, then you can retrain the model and do the same one on the 6 months. So that's in an iterative kind of process where you get better and better over time and get to really kind of very high accuracy rates predicting who's going to buy on your own customer base. So for example, again, we've done some work in the financial world with a big bank in the region, and we got it up to 91% accuracy. And I'll leave that maybe to you to kind of explain that a little bit more in detail, and maybe. Well, in terms of what that means, actually.
I mean, what it just means is, I mean, for the given, if you think about like typical campaign execution cycle, you're not going to spam all of your customers for every promotion, right? So you need to kind of limit that, maybe just out of your own goodwill, but maybe you even have rules within the organization that limit that. So let's say you're trying to target maybe only 15% of your customer base. Obviously, you want to maximize that, right? So a propensity model at least gives you one tool to target that top 15%. And the way we test something like our sort of first level propensity model is just to be able to say, okay, if we target the top 15% of our customers, if we're doing a validation of that model, can we say how many of the customers who actually purchased in our test month or our validation month were predicted by the model, right? And so you can do that month over month, and that's what we're trying to show in that visual. And so what we're saying is here we got, we were able to identify, the model was able to identify 91% of customers who actually purchased, which tells you the model's doing a pretty good job at identifying who your potential customers are. And that's what also then lets you identify what Lauren showed in the earlier slide of, so what are the propensity drivers? Sort of what are the features of the customer that put them in that group.
Yeah,
so
that helps us to identify those people, either on the customer base or even when they come onto an online stream.
And I think that's part of the real insight, because you get those propensity drivers, and if you've done the research, you've got that sort of psychological profile and the needs map, and you can really put those two facets together and get a really deep understanding of who your customers are.
What a nice bridge. And here it is. So, the why. To us, super critical, not only to know what people want to buy and when they want to buy, but also why, because then you can have a much better message. You have a much better way to kind of address those segments to be more relevant to them, because you're not alone. You have competitors, obviously. So what we tend to do is then either we use the research that's there already, or we do our own primary research where we do in-depth and then quant to really segment the market in terms of what are the psychological drivers within that specific category. You might have seen Need Scope from Kantar, which is very generic overall. We do this very specific on the category. So for that category, what really motivates people? And again, this is a very old one. We've done that for the Singapore Tourism Board. It's like, I don't know, 15 years old or something. And I was mentioned one of those kind of earlier in terms of the bonders or the reluctance. So the reluctance is quite interesting. The reluctance are the ones that don't want to go on holiday. They have to go. They are like the manager kind of types. They have to go. They say, okay, if I have to go, I want to have guaranteed results. I want to know where I go. They often go to the same places. So they have a specific behavior to kind of deal to that. So again, if you know those things, if you know this is is the psychological motivations behind that group of people, you know what to talk about. You will be more relevant to them. So we map this out for the entire market, usually with 1,000 people. We go and do a quantitative study and come up with that segmentation. But the key is, when we do that, before we do that, we go into the database, we understand how the database is structured and what behavioral and social demographic info we have about our customers. Because once we have done that exercise, we can then tie it back into the database. So every client of yours, we can figure out what psychological segment they actually belong to. So just by understanding the social demographics, the behavior questions, and anything that we have on the database, we can ask those questions in the quant. And then we can actually tie those segments back to the database. And then it becomes really very powerful, because you not only know who they are, what they want, when they want it, but you also know why they want it. And that gives you everything you need to have a very effective communication and a very effective CRM kind of campaign, or doing whatever you want to do with these client contacts at that point. So that's the whole psychology angle that we kind of put on top. So we have the machine learning, we have the psychology, and of course you have the general kind of social demographics.
Can I just interject? I mean, I just want to drive that last point home about the going to your CRM first before doing the research. I feel like oftentimes you have the research that's done, I mean, not in a vacuum, but with the standard brief, but without actually kind of looking in detail at your CRM, or not just your CRM, but whatever first-party data you have. I mean, but whatever those features and signals are, you really want that to tie into your research brief, so that you can then bring those research results back and really map it to whoever your customers are. Because if you don't do that, I mean, your link between the research and your actual customers is always a bit more probabilistic, a little bit looser than it could be, right? So I mean, thinking about that first before you do the research brief, I think is really, really valuable, and really can't be kind of overstated.
Okay. Yeah, this is really critical, because then once you have this all together, you have a very, very effective tool in your hands in terms of your segmentation on how you need to kind of talk to your customers, as well as to people outside of your base, to make your brand more attractive. So this is just, to be honest, we've done it for one client and it's possible. And I say Gen AI is something we can deal with and we can build those things. And it can be very, very effective if you're a digital company and you have a lot of campaigns going on and we go into micro-segmentation. Then having a Gen AI tool that generates the messages on the basis of the segmentation with all the psychology, with all the who, why, what, and when is very effective, because then you can manage it with like 2-3 people as opposed to have a whole department of 20 or 30. So if that's the case, then this tool is very, very helpful. We've tried it out, it works, and it also like helps to track it so that you can kind of re-optimize as you go through the process. And again, that's the beauty of having that segmentation. You can get better and better at it by measuring your effect on what you're doing. Okay, so I got a lot of flack for this from all my partners. I feel like I'm selling too hard here. I don't want to sell to you. Well, maybe a little, but the point is what I'm trying to make here is it actually does work. It actually, if you apply it and if you apply it for yourself, it does work. So the conversion goes up, and I would even say he always hates me for saying that. But if we work with a client that has not applied machine learning yet, it's almost by default a double-digit growth rate, right? So it's just works. So if you have decent data, of course. So here's just a few examples. So for a bank, basically, we were able to kind of sell 6 times better. What was that? That was a big
than their
bank.
previous campaigns. Yeah.
Than the previous campaign. We talked about the 25% already for FMCG, for white goods as well as for electronics. 4-fold, 5-fold. I mean, these are numbers that are really encouraging, and you get better and better at it. It's just the beginning, right? So it kind of works if you make your segmentation more actionable by including those tools. So here's just one example, and I'm showing this example because when we worked with this bank before, they had said like, oh, we don't want to do this machine learning thing. We have 200 data scientists. We've done PPMs ourselves. Didn't work. Forget about it. So the whole bank was like, eh. So we had to actually go through a long, long buying cycle. Say, come on, let's try it. Let's do it in a proper way. But once we did it in a proper way, we could show them what results it actually yields. And that was actually a real game changer. So that might be the same for you internally, for your organization. And because by now, especially the big companies, they all have their own data science department, but sometimes not very effective. You need to do it in a very proper kind of scientific way, like a real experiments. So here's an example we've done for the bank. So the bank was in Malaysia, said, okay, let's focus only on Johor and Malacca, I think. So they had like 2.1 million customers there, 1.4 had a consent, so we were able to kind of contact them, and they say, okay, this is our pool of people that we can work with on their database. And then we ran that experiment, and we kind of had 3 buckets of customers, basically, right? So we started with the control group first, 200,000 random stratified, just picking it out of the bucket, basically, just get 200,000 out there. Then we had another bucket which would only get, these are only the people that we have identified as being most ready to buy. So that we call them the PPM kind of test group, the purchase propensity test group. And then we had a third one where we said, okay, this is also part of the 30% most likely to buy, but here we only apply the psychology as well to see whether this also works and yields more effect. So we had these 3 buckets, and then we ran a campaign with them. And that campaign had standard messages for this, like what they always do. They had also standard messages for this one, and this was specific messages based on the psychology of the segments. So altogether, of course, out of the top 30 that we identified with our PPM in the control group, by accident, there would also be some of them because you just randomized, kind of choose them. So we ran them, very controlled experiment. We had a very basic campaign, basically just push notification to customers. So very, very little space to kind of do a lot of things about it. So it would run like this. It was all about selling gold, basically, making people buy gold. That was it. And we had a little bit promotion attached to it. And I'm just cutting this short here within that. I'm getting already a sign. We were able to beat the previous campaigns by 10-fold, by 6-fold in terms of the results that we were able to achieve. We had a control group, so we were 3 times better than the control group, and had over 600,000 ringgit more sales out of this, again, very small campaign. And out of the 50 customers that bought the most gold, the machine actually picked 47 of them. So we only missed 3 customers that were really ready to buy. And then in terms of the segments that in terms of psychology, segment 1 and 3 actually worked the hardest in terms of volume versus the, in terms of how much they would buy like per person. And we identified that on the psychology before, because one was more promotion-led and the other one was more quality-led. And we're kind of successful on segment 1 and 3 as well. So summing this up, so for this specific case, we identified those 4 psychological segments. We established the PPM. We flagged then the segmentation within the database, addressed them with the campaign, and achieved those results. So that was just like a POC, basically, a proof of concept. So kind of how it works, basically. And that was it already. I'm getting already nervous signs. No. Are you good? Anyway, so that's in summary what we hope to achieve with that is like it is worth looking into machine learning and AI. It is worth kind of bringing it together with something more meaningful and in depth, which is the psychology, to really drive results within your own efforts, basically. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.